Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah, you got a bunch of frogmen going down, Navy SEALs getting in a van to go do drugs they've never even heard of before. We're all terrified. I was never terrified overseas, right? I was never terrified ever in my life. But what we were terrified was ourselves, what the medicine's going to show us.
Give me the story of how you guys first met.
So we met in context of treatment with psychedelics. So I was running a program for special operations guys called The Mission Within. And we had been working with veterans since 2015. And I had treated some of Michael's or Punky's friends. So he was trying to refer another buddy. And I don't want to get too much into the details because it concerns just medical information, but I'll let Punky really dive into how far and how deep he wants to go.
Yeah, pretty much what Martine said. It was 2 years ago. I had 4 years out of my retirement and was in school, and it was finally the train of life finally caught up with me. And I had reached out to Martine to help another friend of mine to get into a program that I had heard about from a bunch of other friends, but didn't really know too much about. And it was a psychedelic program. And it came around at just the right time for me and at just the right time for my friends as well. Then I've been involved with Martine ever since.
What do you mean when you say that the train of life had come around?
Yeah, for me, it's a 30 years in the SEAL teams, and the normal, I say the normal life traumas that we all have that we kind of run away from, like we're always moving target until life catches up with us. So, childhood traumas as a kid, and then life traumas as a young adult, 2 divorces, had a spouse addicted to opioids, living in that kind of tumultuous world. Then a daughter addicted to opioids as well at the time during the big opioid epidemic. At the same time, the war kicked off, so I was like fighting. I felt like I was kind of fighting on 2 different fronts at the same time. Then a bunch of losses overseas of friends, and then a bunch of moral injury, then a bunch of blast injuries to my noggin, and then masking all that with pain pills and psychotropics and everything else, just trying to keep the wheels turning and keep myself moving forward, and eventually just kind of all caught up with me.
Were you trying to medicate while you were still in the teams to keep you moving forward while you were working?
Yeah, a lot of it was pain management, and then a lot of it was just my cognitive ability was just severely declining over time. I was a breacher in the SEAL teams and a sniper, then just a bunch of blast injuries from training and from combat. Was starting to suffer memory loss, massive migraines, and then just the frustrations that come with that, trying to mask it and cover it up and kind of move through life. And then on top of all the other daily things that I was struggling with on the home front, and then show up to work with a smile on my face going, hey, I'm ready to go. Right. And like we all do. And, then I'd gotten out and retired at the end of 2016. Went off to grad school, was going to school up at USC. And then I had 4 more of my friends passed away in the teams. And then I had 2 close friends got blown up in Syria. And at that time, when that happened, that was just my catalyst for just meltdown.
I agree. I do think that most people that have got problems, whatever that's going on at home or personally or medically, have to put a smile on and go to work. But the risks of most people's jobs are not quite as dramatic as somebody that's doing Overwatch as a sniper or breaching the door so that everybody else goes in. So there is a total extra level of pressure, I suppose, to do that. How would you categorize the atmosphere generally in the armed forces around difficulties with injuries from the past, with emotional traumas from the past at the moment?
Yeah, as far as the injuries go, it's interesting, at least in our community. And I remember when I was going to like the naval hospital, and it was full of people trying to get out of work, so they're all hanging around the hospital, right? And then in the spec ops community, you don't go to the doctor because you don't want to lose time at work. You want to work, and because if you're absent for work, you may lose that spot, right? It's the same as playing on the sports team, right? So everyone was always masking pain, masking injuries as long as they could. So that just kind of got looked by. Now, if they needed help, they always got it. And then as far as the mental health aspect of it, there was just always this kind of a fine line. But, we were always told, hey, the medical professionals are here to help you. But there was always just this fear, like, hey, how much do I share before I get grounded or taken offline? So, you answer the questions, and the questions are always yes until a point, and then it's no, 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 no. And can I get back in the game, right? So the help was always available to us. Hardly anyone really fully took advantage of it. Just, I think it had a fear of just getting sidelined.
Yeah, so you have some slightly contradictory incentives here. The guys don't want to have themselves taken out of action because it's their job, it's their duty, they feel competent at it. For a lot of people, it's probably their sense of meaning in life as well. And you've got, I guess, this tension between the two. You've got, on one hand, I need to look after my health. I need to make sure that I'm not so far gone that I basically can't do my job anymore. But you're talking about a group of people that have been trained to be able to put up with severe levels of discomfort for extended periods of time. I mean, that you've selected for a group of people, I imagine, that are going to be able to tamp down their emotions and swallow that discomfort, whether it be physical or emotional, for a pretty good period.
Yeah, it was super interesting too, because, I always laugh. Everyone's like, the SEAL teams, the Spec Ops, like, you guys are always so close. We don't know shit about each other because everyone keeps up the veil. Even as close as you are, there's still a degree of separation between the true you and, and what the face that you're putting out to your friends. So maybe people know kind of maybe what's going on in your marital life, your dating life, and stuff like that. But as far as the really deep stuff, no one's going to share the underbelly, right? They're just not going to expose that.
Do you think it's possible for somebody in the SEALs to develop that kind of a relationship, or do you think that would be so antagonistic to the sort of way that they need to show up, to the atmosphere within the team itself? Is it possible to be able to be that open and still be effective as a member of the team that's maybe seeing death and destruction every day?
Yeah, I maybe, but I think it would have to be really brought on so early in the pipeline, right? So that's ingrained, it's institutionalized to where that trust factor is really there. No one wants to feel that they're holding anybody back. I think that's the big thing. And then, no one wants to be looked upon as weak or not being able to handle things. If you can't handle your life at home, can you handle life overseas, right? And all that kind of goes together. So, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not really sure what the answer to that is yet.
I've spoken to a guy called BT Urella, who is a buddy of mine for 3 and a bit years. He started the Veteran Sports League, and he was injured, tried to save one of his legs during an IED attack, and for a very long time was battling backward and forward with that, couple of suicide attempts. And the savior that he had out the other side of that was the fact that he actually went for amputation. Now, I didn't realize that if you go for elective amputation, they make you wait, I want to say 6 months maybe, or a year, because they want to ensure that this is, I mean, you can't, there's no command and Z on this. You can't undo this particular surgery. So they need to make sure that you're well done in that way. But even with him, he wasn't a SEAL, he was just an infantryman. Even he was talking about this strange balance between what you need to show forward-facing, the expectation around you. I think the conversation, certainly over the last 15 to 20 years, seems to have developed a lot more than, go back 100 years, calling it shell shock, go back to Vietnam and people coming home and having very, very low levels of support. The really sort of interesting, pervasive thing here is that it's not about the facilities not being there. It's not even so much anymore about the cultural norms not being there. It's to do with something that's quite internal to the individuals themselves and the sense of expectation and the desire to show up and perform for the team. I guess one of the problems there is that's even more scalable, right? That's even more deeply seated. How are you going to pull that out of somebody? You can offer all of the treatments and support and courses that you want. But how do you actually begin to get somebody to make that decision to reach out for help? So, I mean, when it comes to you, there had to be a day upon which you woke up and realized, right, I have to make a change here, that I cannot continue to go like this? What was that point?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was actually after I retired, because I remember probably the last maybe 4 or 5 years of my active duty service, I was struggling. And I was command master chief of a SEAL team too, and a pretty high level, listed leader, running programs and pretty well respected. Like, all right, how do I maintain this reputation? Because your reputation in such a small unit is so critical, right? That's how you get promoted. That's how you get selected. All the other things that kind of go on with that. So there's a lot of pride in it, and we all know that pride's a double-edged sword, right? Yeah, but it wasn't until after, and it was really when my friend really started having his breakdown and started bringing up a lot of stuff in me, that my emotions and memories and everything just kind of caught up with me. That it was past the point of my handling it myself. It's like, hey, I need some help now. I mean, I was suicidal at the time when I called Martine. And I had been there once before too. So I was like, all right, I know where this is going to lead very quickly. But it took me a very long time to get there.
Martine, what's the beginning of your story of how you start to get yourself involved in this world?
So that was back 1999. I was trying to help a family member. I was in medical school at the time, and she was dealing with a cocaine addiction. And we had tried all the Western approaches, what's usually recommended, which is the 12 steps rehab, threats, kicking her out of the house. But nothing seems to stick with her, like nothing was working. So I had always had an interest in psychedelics, starting as a teenager. And so I knew that there was something that could potentially help her. And I was aware of iboga because I'd watched a documentary. So I looked it up online, and I took her to see a provider. And iboga is still pretty obscure, but back then it was even more obscure. There was not a lot of data. There was some research going on at the island of St. Kitts. And there was one provider that I found that would help her. So I took her, and it was really remarkable to see the pre and the post. So she was in denial that cocaine was a problem, because she had actually started with an eating disorder, and the cocaine, took away the hunger. So it was a solution. And oftentimes when people fall into addiction, they're self-medicating either depression or anxiety. So the drug serves a purpose. And I think that's often missed when people look at addiction. They just view it as a moral failing or, a certain weakness, but there's always something underneath it, which is generally trauma. So having, that experience of me witnessing her going through this process, and the very next day having this deep understanding of her addiction and the need to move away from it was striking, because there's nothing in Western medicine that with one single treatment can take you and give you that perspective. So I, it stuck in my mind, started my training in eye surgery. I was going to become an ophthalmologist, but I could never get that out of my head that there was a treatment that could help addiction. So I took a year off and started an iboga clinic back in 2000 in Mexico City. Ran that program for a number of years until 2015, when I met some veterans that were using heroin, and they reported their PTSD was gone. So I was, again, intrigued, because there's nothing that we have in our arsenal that actually cures PTSD. We have treatments to mitigate it, to numb symptoms, but to address it at a core level where the person no longer meets the diagnostic criteria with a single treatment is pretty unheard of. So I started seeing more veterans, and it just took off after I treated a few SEALs. They're a very tight-knit community, so they started referring their friends, and that just started growing. 2020, 2021 was super busy years, and obviously COVID had something to do with it, because people are struggling. And yeah, that takes us to now, which is a program that is just kept growing over the years.
You saw an increase in the number of veterans suffering with PTSD during COVID.
I think it was twofold. I think it was the fact that gyms closed, so they didn't have that outlet of the physical exercise. The social isolation, being stuck at home, with family is very challenging sometimes. Along with greater awareness that psychedelics are a good option for addressing what I consider the core injury instead of special operations community, which is mild traumatic brain injury. So it's not even the PTSD. I would say every single operator that has gone through their training has been exposed to multiple blast injuries. And it doesn't mean an IED. It could be shooting a mortar, being close to rockets, opening doors with explosives. Even repetitive gunfire will cause a certain overpressure wave that can rattle the brain in a way where it's not designed to be, shooken. And this can cause inflammation. This can cause hormone dysregulation. And over time, sometimes years, this manifests with anger, insomnia, depression, anxiety. So we look at it as a biological injury, not so much merely stress or depression or anxiety. There's something going on physically in the brain of these guys.
Does that predispose people to whatever's classified as PTSD now? Is that laying some sort of biological foundation that a psychological construction can be built on top of?
Definitely. And then there's also the childhood stuff. So a lot of the guys that come through, they come from troubled backgrounds or broken homes. And it's pretty common, I think, that people gravitate towards the military because they want more structure. They want that kind of external source of discipline. So there is the complex PTSD, which is childhood trauma and post-traumatic stress. And then obviously the brain injury is laying kind of this fertile field for people to then get further traumatized and display even more symptoms. And then the ways of coping with it are also problematic because oftentimes they resort to alcohol, and alcohol is inflammatory, so it makes the brain injury worse. So it's this kind of cycle of kind of repeated insults to the brain, which can lead to pretty bad outcomes. A lot of the guys that we're treating are suicidal when they come in.
I suppose one of the particularly brutal things as well about being an ex-special forces operative that's suicidal is you're intimately familiar with lethal violence too, and it's not good to be able to be great at killing when the person that you're looking at potentially harming is yourself. And I remember hearing a while ago, I think this is true, that women commit suicide more than men, but women actually try to take their life more than men. It's just that men are better with lethal force, so they're more successful at taking their own life.
More successful.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that statistic is, it kind of changed a lot of what I thought about how we should be dealing with and treating suicide. I don't really know what that means. It means that more women are getting themselves to the stage where they consider killing themselves. Yeah, very, very. That's just such an interesting stat. So if we were to try and create an avatar of a very common sort of ex-special forces soldier patient that comes through the doors of your clinic, what would that person look like? What would their age be? What would they present as? What would the sort of state texture of their mind be like? What would that avatar be?
So from a demographic standpoint, we're looking at 30 to 40-year-olds. The majority of the guys we're treating are post 9/11 veterans. So they've served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the SEAL community has, I don't know if it's self-selected, but it's mostly white men. They're generally type A, like very, like they're overachievers, they're elite performers. In terms of the issues that they're dealing with, there's this thing called operator syndrome that was characterized by a researcher named Chris Frew. And he looked at this complex symptomatology and presentation that they have, and it includes hormone dysregulation, family issues, insomnia, anger, sleep issues. We see a lot of sleep apnea as well. Obviously, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, and all these things are interrelated. So when somebody has chronic pain, it wakes them up at night. And then if you're not sleeping, then the not sleeping by itself is a type of brain injury. So getting the sleep under control is one of the most important things. And then obviously, like the diet that we have in the West is not helpful. And a lot of the psychopharmaceuticals that they get prescribed actually make things worse. I mean, I've treated guys that were on 13 different medications. So first we have to get them off of the medications. And that by itself is a process, because anytime you're tapering off a medication, you're going to get the opposite effect. So if you've been on Xanax for a number of years, when you get off it, you'll have even worse anxiety. So it's definitely a process, and I'm sure Punky can add to more of the psychographic of the patients.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So when I went through, I was 50. How old am I? I was 52. But it was a lot of my peers. I mean, when I walked in the room, we treat 6 clients a week, and I walk in the room and I know 4 of them, right? That are my peers, right? And they're like, "Oh, you too?" And I get, "Yeah, man, me too." But yeah, the demographic is just pretty much everybody in there. And just like Martine said, we're all high performance. It's a high performance environment. I was on 12 different medications when I came down. Psychotropics, pain meds, antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills, just all sorts of this concoctions, right, to deal with whatever the hell I had going on. And interestingly enough, I'm off every single one of those except for my blood pressure meds. To include my sleep meds, I go to bed at 9 o'clock. I wake up at 6 in the morning. I sleep, and I've got sleep apnea, and I went years and years with zero sleep. But yeah, the demographic, it's 30 to 50, and typically because it's the guys, they're post-service veterans that are coming in, so they've already either retired or they separated early. So you're looking at probably 60% of guys that are 20 to 30-year veterans, and then the rest that separated early. It's a big swath.
Can you explain the experience of going through the doors of that treatment center for the first time, Punky?
Yeah, it was terrifying. It's funny. I laugh. Yeah, you got a bunch of frogmen going down, Navy SEALs, getting in a van to go do drugs they've never even heard of before. We're all terrified. And we're like, I was never terrified overseas, right? I was never terrified ever in my life. But what we were terrified was ourselves, right? What the medicine's going to show us. So, no, I had reached out to Martine for a friend of mine and got in touch with him. And then he hooked me up for a medical screening. So I got screened medically. Then I got aligned with a coach for my preparation training, which is key to all of this.
What does that look like?
What's psychedelic experience?
What's the preparation training look like?
Yeah, so I had zero experience with any, recreational pharmacology or psychedelics at all, as in high school and college. So what the coach really walked me through, my coach Cynthia, was just like, hey, here's what the medicines can do. Here's what they can unlock. Here's how you navigate the space when you're in it. Here's how to frame your intentions, face your expectations, so you don't set yourself up for failure going into medicine. And here's how you navigate the medicine when you're in it. And then, hey, here's what's going to come up afterwards, or here's what can come up afterwards, and here's how we work through this. That was key. And then I got screened medically, went down, I got my heart checked out, did some labs and stuff, make sure and then I had to taper off all those crazy meds that I was already on, and then went down. We had, the way we run the retreat, and the same as when I went through, we have 6 clients per weekend. So we went down, met up with our therapist and our coach. There's a therapist down there, trauma therapist. There's veteran coaches that are down there, typically from the spec ops community. So they're peers, helping the guys through. Then there's a cook down there that's also been working in the space forever. Then there's the organic medical staff for the clinic. So we got down to the house. We did a bunch of preparation work when we got there. Again, kind of everyone sharing their story. Hey, who's who in the zoo here? How did we get here? And it was interesting because we're going around the circle of telling stories, and here's guys that I know and that knew me, and this is the first of any of us have ever heard the other guy's story. Like, oh, wow, I didn't know that about you. I'm sorry, I didn't know that about you. Yeah. Then later that night, we got EKGs done and some more lab work done, and then we did a little fire ceremony. We kind of walked through our intentions. We burned. We wrote down our intentions for us to receive from the medicine, and then what we wanted to get out of our lives, which for me was, the story's almost the same, right? Shame, anger, guilt, pain, anguish, all that stuff, hate. And then we burned that in a small fire ceremony, and then we took the medicine. The medicine we took is iboga from the iboga root. In this case, it's in pill form. It's an isolate. So we took that and then went upstairs and laid there. It seemed like for 2 days. It was only like an hour waiting for the medicine to kick in. And
talk to me about,
it kicked in.
So you're someone that hasn't played around with psychedelics beforehand. You are at a particular point in your life where things have got pretty intense. You've needed to reach out for help. You've had this built up. Now, obviously, the preparation and the counseling will have tried to calm you down, but you're not going to be able to get away from the fact that I've just taken something. It's inside of me. There's no going back. What's that 1 hour before everything kicks in? What does that feel like?
I think the hour was shorter than the fact of the time that I had the pill in my hand staring at it, right? Like, am I going to take this one? It's just a red pill or the blue pill, right? And I was just like, fuck it. What have I got to lose? 2 weeks ago, I had a gun to my head, so screw this. So took the pill and then just lay there waiting. And obviously the anticipation and even the weeks going into it, stuff starts to come up. The medicine works before you're ever even in the medicine and just starts unearthing things. So it was really kind of beautiful. And my medicine journey played out very interestingly for me. So in the SEAL teams, I did a lot of targeting and just hunting people down. We used a program in the SEAL teams called Palantir. It's a link diagram program. It's all like cause and effect and stuff. So to get to X, I need to go here, but I need to find this person first and this person, this person. And it actually did that with me all the way through my life. So it would bring up people and flash them in front of my face. It was like, oh, that's my mother, or that's my father, or that's this person. But it would keep going until I recognized them at a certain age. And then it took me back into their life and it played out their life. And then it brought it back to our intersect. And then it played that forward. So I got to see, kind of where my abuses happened as a kid, but also how it played out for my parents and other stuff. And then other people that came into my lives. Same thing from overseas. I had a bunch of situations that happened. It just kind of kept playing it for me. It's like, plays for you a million different ways. It's all going to turn out the same. So by the end of that journey, I kind of came out. I was just like, which is complete understanding and reconciliation. So I got to basically relive my entire life over again without the emotion attached to it. And it was powerful. I remember I just woke up and I cried. And I was like, I had a million people to apologize to and a million people to forgive. And the fact that I wanted to forgive people was huge because that was a huge anchor, right? And then, I came out of the medicine fairly early in the morning. Other guys came out a little bit later in the day.
How long is the duration of the trip?
It's about 10 to 12 hours in it. And then you're out typically by roughly noon the next day. So there's a peak period of time where you're really deep in the medicine that slowly starts to wane off. It is a stimulant, so you're not really sleeping because your brain is just remapping itself and it's working all night. And when I came out too, I felt like someone had put a vacuum cleaner into my brain, like it was still. It was finally quiet. And I've always had monkey mind and chatter, all that noise that's always in there. And it was just completely quiet, which was very eerie and scary at the same time, and peaceful at the same time. It was nice to have. And then the other guys kind of came out a little bit later in the day. Some people had rough, ugly journeys. Mine was rough, but it wasn't painful for me to see. It was just very teaching. Some people had very joyous journeys. Some people had very lost in space journeys. So everyone's journey is extremely different. It's interesting too. Same medicines, and actually some of the same traumas going into it, but the journeys play out entirely differently for everybody. And then that night, we did some more integration work. Pretty smoked that day. Ibogaine is really taxing on the body. It's extremely draining. And then we did prep work for Sunday. For Sunday morning, we did 5-MeO-DMT, which is from the snoring desert toad. Some people call it the God molecule, the spirit molecule. Super powerful medicine. I always laugh, like, who figured these things out, right? Bunch of kids go in the desert. They found a toad. They cooked it over fire, and they talked to God. I mean, how does this thing play out? But it's a beautiful, beautiful medicine. And if you look back into history too, the toad and the mushrooms, like in all these artifacts all over the world. So that medicine, the way I like to explain it is, where the Ibogaine really dove into a lot of cerebral memory and just unearthed stuff. The 5 is a very powerful emotional medicine. And it goes in and it just unearths all these, I like to just say, suppressed emotions. And you're talking a lifetime of suppressed emotions. Happiness, pain, sadness, guilt, anger, shame, all that stuff has a voice to it. And it causes damage. And if you let it, then it'll get there. It comes out. And to someone outside the room, it can sound like there's helter-skelter going in there, and murder, death, kill, or Chuck E. Cheese birthday party, or complete joy, or the Super Bowl, depending upon what's going on. To the guy or girl that's there, we're just laying there just expelling all this energy and this emotion that needs to come out. And on the other side of that is ego dissolution, just complete connectivity right back to yourself again. I fought my medicine. It was too much love for me. Like, I just received this flood dose of love and I didn't want it. I couldn't handle it. And I fought it. And then I tried to get back into it and I couldn't get back in. And then I thought I failed because I couldn't do it. And, but I remember I was talking to my coach, Cynthia, at the time, and she's like, no, you felt it. You saw it. Yeah, I did. So you go, well, you can get there again. So after I left after that weekend, for me, it's like, all right, I know what's on the other side of this curtain. And I'm just going to continue to do my work and get there. So it was about 3-4 months later that I finally broke all the way through with a different medicine, with the intent of just allowing myself to surrender, give it in. But the heavy lifting I had already done. The big boulder had already been moved right from out of the way when I was down in Mexico. Other guys and girls, the other guys with me had just these beautiful spiritual journeys. And then some, again, were dark. Everyone's journey is just completely unique. Some people have beautiful Ibogaine journeys and horrible 5 MEO journeys, and sometimes it's flipped over, the other way around. But eventually in the weeks after, it just kind of all starts to play out. You start to get these downloads and everything just kind of falls right back in line. So it all doesn't happen right in the medicine. It's what happens after that. And if I had not had my coach, Cynthia, work with me at the time, I could have easily just kind of gone into self-destructive mode of like, hey, I fucked this up. I failed this. I didn't do it right. I wasted these people's time and all that. And it wasn't the case at all. So that was a huge win for me. Yeah, just a beautiful medicine pairing, and just the container the mission within it set down that was just so powerful. Like, got a bunch of guys that come in, and were a bunch of alpha males, but we're entirely just extremely scared at the time. But they set the right container. It just helped us navigate through that space.
What was the medication that you used after 4 months? What was the different thing that you used that time?
After that, I ended up going out to a reservation out here in San Diego, and I'd done a very heavy psilocybin dose with the Indians out here. A heavy psilocybin dose.
Do you know how much? Do you know how much it was?
And gotten through there. 20 grams.
Sorry.
20 grams.
Okay. Martin, can you try and explain what's going on in the brain that's causing this particular restructuring? Why that combination of iboga and 5-MeO, and how is it that there's obviously something functional that happens, or something physical that happens, but then there's also something psychological, something emotional, maybe even something spiritual. How does all of this work together?
Yeah, no, you hit it right on the nail on the head, which is there's a physiological changes, there is psychological changes, and there's also a spiritual effect of these compounds. From a physiological standpoint, ibogaine is not considered a clean drug in that it doesn't affect one single receptor. So ibogaine affects about 50 different neuroreceptors. So it's working on many levels on the dopaminergic system, on serotonin, on the opioid receptors. It's increasing communication between both hemispheres. It's helping stimulate neurogenesis, so it elevates levels of BDNF and GDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor and glial-derived neurotropic factor. So there's new brain cells being grown. And then from a psychological standpoint, the ibogaine is a shadow work, so it allows a person to deal with unprocessed trauma, like unfinished business, things that they've been avoiding, childhood stuff that they might have repressed. A lot of the trauma that we have is pre-verbal, so it happens before the age of 5. And because the language centers in the brain are not developed, it doesn't get encoded in language. So there's no way to access it just through psychotherapy, because you're trying to use a semantic framing to access things that are like visionary, almost like they're just energetic patterns that are encoded. So with an ibogaine journey, because you're gaining this perspective and seeing yourself as a child, and you're floating in the room, it's almost like this observer standpoint from Buddhism, where you're just objectively observing without the emotional pain of the memory, so you don't get re-traumatized. But you're now an adult, so you're seeing it through the eyes of an adult, and you're able to then recontextualize what happened to that child and understand it better from a different perspective. Many times, we blame our parents for things they did or they didn't do, but we don't realize like what they were dealing with at the time or the trauma that they had. So being able to see it in that kind of broader swath of like their history as well leads to a lot of forgiveness and understanding. But it's not easy, because you're confronted with opportunities you've missed, people you've hurt, and just ways that we've shown up in relationship with other people that we're not kind of in alignment with our highest self. Sometimes you're even shown how you were perceived by that person through their own eyes. It's almost like you're in the back of their head seeing yourself, like how you reacted to things they did. So a lot of people, they want to go home and fix relationships right away, but we tell them to like just take some time, because the person might not be able to the person you hurt might not be able to receive that information. So a lot of shadow work with the ibogaine, and then the 5-MeO is very different, because it's more of the mystical experience. So it's that sense of oneness, of unity, of connection. People report being in the presence of God, feeling that they've gone to heaven almost, and recognizing themselves as divine beings. So going from the shadow work and kind of these difficult experiences to then the 5-MeO is a very healing process, because some of the stuff that the ibogaine shows you is just hard to integrate, because it might not even be your stuff. It could be just the pain of the planet, factory farms or war or things that are happening that we might not be aware of, but it shows you that. And then the 5-MeO just blows it all away. It shows you that everything is as it should be, and that everything is perfect and in your control. From a physiological standpoint, the 5-MeO reduces inflammation. And when you have a brain injury that is related to blast exposure, when you have a mild traumatic brain injury and you are able to reduce inflammation, the brain can heal itself. So the neurogenesis from the ibogaine and the reduced inflammation from the 5-MeO go perfectly hand in hand. So there's a synergistic effect. They're also working on different neurotransmitter systems. And like Punky was saying, the experience itself might be 30% of the healing, but the integration of the experience is 70%. It's what you do with it. It's the meditation, the yoga, the ice baths, regular coaching sessions, relying on your therapist and really taking advantage of the resources that are available. And this is a lifelong process. It's not, 1 month, 3 months. It's for the rest of your life. You really have to work on yourself to maintain these benefits. If you don't, then the experience can fade after 2 or 3 months.
Punky, did you do your ibogaine, your 5-MeO, and then your psilocybin? And was that pharmacologically, was that the lion's share of the work that needed to be done?
No. I like to say it's peeling the onion, right? I didn't get here in one day, and I'm not going to get out of this in one day either. But what I got from that 1 weekend in Mexico was enough to really move the needle in a significant way. It allowed me to get to the X, which therapy was never getting me to. But even though I got to the X, there's still more stuff that kept coming up. I was like, whoa, there's more. So, subsequent medicine journeys for me, been able to help me work through that. So typically I do all my work, and if I get to a sticking point that I can't get any further, with all the right things that I'm doing and with my coach and with my therapist, and sometimes I lean into medicine. Sometimes it shows me more, I get more downloads, or I get more insight. Sometimes there's nothing to see. Sometimes I just need to offload some energy, or just some built up, stuff that just needs to go away. But I don't do much medicine. I haven't touched psychedelics. It's almost been a year now. So that first year was pretty heavy for me, and just kind of peeling back that onion as fast as I could. And then two, they kind of kept falling in front of me, like right at the right time. Like I would just bump into someone that knew somebody, and I would go experience another modality, because all these medicines have just such a different energy to them. But it was the right medicine for me at the right time, and they're just entirely different. I think I had zero practice going in when I met Martine. I couldn't meditate. I had zero mindfulness practice. I had no any good practice whatsoever other than throwing weights around. That was it. Right? So my self-care, my self-understanding was to a point is almost zero. It's entirely different now, just the way that I move through life.
What is the reason for working with Martine? Do you work with anything else other than ibogaine and 5-MeO, or are those the two that you work with mostly?
So we've been working mostly with ibogaine and 5-MeO, and we've done a few retreats with psilocybin, so with mushrooms. And these have mainly been for the spouses of veterans that have also experienced trauma, just by being in that community and also living with them and going through the process of grieving and loss because they've had so much death. We have retreats for psilocybin and for ibogaine.
What's the reason for not using peyote, or for not using non-5-MeO? Yeah,
so there's obviously benefits to, say, a peyote journey or an ayahuasca journey. I think with ayahuasca, you have to be trained in that lineage, and I don't feel qualified to administer that. We are partnered with a nonprofit called Heroic Hearts Project that runs ayahuasca retreats. So we generally just refer people to them if they want to do work with ayahuasca. The peyote is a little bit challenging because of sustainability issues. So it's hard to promote a compound which is sacred to Native Americans and which is running out because it takes so many years to mature. So mostly when people want to try mescaline, I would direct them to San Pedro, which has very similar effects and is a lot more common.
What about ketamine? What about MDMA? I've seen a lot of talk about that as treatment for PTSD as well.
Yeah, ketamine is wonderful as a kind of a short-term, staunch the bleeding type of intervention when somebody's suicidal. We can refer them to a ketamine provider in the US because it's the one psychedelic that's already legal. So you can find it everywhere in the US. For MDMA, it's a bit problematic because it's not legal in Mexico. So ibogaine and 5-MeO are legal. They were never scheduled. So they're basically not recognized by Mexican law as being compounds of abuse. With psilocybin, it falls into more of a gray area where it can be used ceremoniously if used by indigenous people in indigenous contexts. Other countries like Jamaica, they're very open about psilocybin. So we are setting up a retreat center there, which is going to be mainly for military families. So spouses and adult children, but also for female veterans that are dealing with sexual trauma, which we have to separate the men from the women because oftentimes the perpetrators were other people in the military. So,
what is the current legality around this in America at the moment? If you're somebody that's been in the U.S. Special Forces, you simply can't get this legally in America, I'm guessing.
Only ketamine can be done legally. What Punky was referring to of Native American reservations, there is a dispensation there that there's tribal sovereignty. So there's the Native American church. There's also some ayahuasca churches that have exemptions, but mostly the work has to happen under kind of FDA approved trials. And there are a few there's something called expanded access, where they're already they've proven to the FDA that these compounds are effective, specifically MDMA and psilocybin. So now there's a possibility to start offering it more widely, but it's still very limited and small. Most sites only get 5 slots, so it's difficult. So most people are traveling; they're going to different locales overseas where these things are legal.
What is the potential usefulness of this for people who don't have super strong PTSD? It sounds like a lot of people may have had trauma that has been ingrained before they can even remember it, certainly before they can semantically put it into words. So is there a case to be made that far more people than just veterans perhaps might need this?
I would say they don't need it, but they would definitely, most people have trauma that they haven't processed. There's just things that they might not be aware of. There is some evidence that microdosing can help with creativity and just be a better option for people than Adderall. So it does have some elements of increasing human performance and making people more empathetic, more connected to themselves, more aware, better in relationships, just nicer humans.
It makes me think how many people at the moment, we've got a pandemic of anxiety, of people being very, very concerned about their mental health at the moment. And you can lay this at the feet of social media if you want, but there's a lot of other things, I think, that are contributing to this. Increases in single-parent households, higher levels of uncertainty about life paths for the future, lack of connection to religion, lack of connection to your local community. You know, the list is pretty endless of the grand narratives that have collapsed so that people now feel a little bit atomized. I'm just wondering how much of that, you know, how much a therapeutic session of something like ibogaine could perhaps help them.
Yeah. Probably, I mean, I would recommend, like, if somebody's going to try psychedelics, I would actually start with breath work or with flotation therapy and then move on to psychedelics. And then of the psychedelics, ibogaine is, you know, like the big gun, is the Mount Everest of experiences. So there's some psychological challenges that it can bring up, but also there's some physical risks. It can affect your heart rate. It can cause arrhythmias in combination with other drugs. So it's definitely delicate. Ayahuasca and 5-MeO can be hard to integrate. So when people ask me like where they should start once they want to do a psychedelic journey, ketamine is probably the easiest entry point because it's short. You know, it can be manageable. You can titrate the dose really carefully. And then mushrooms would be the next one. So I do think that for the wider population that is dealing with this kind of this sense of disconnection and there's a lot of, you know, causes to it. I think we're disconnected from each other. We're disconnected from nature. Very few people find meaning in their jobs. So having community, especially if it's like guided through a trained facilitator and there is a psychedelic type practice, could be transformative for us as a society.
Well, in an ideal world, we would be able to fix the cause of the problem rather than finding a solution to it on the other side, right? At the moment, we are retrospectively going back and then trying to, okay, something went wrong, let's go and fix it. It would be much better for nothing to have gone wrong in the first place. You mentioned there about the fact that ibogaine particularly can be quite challenging. Are there any issues of dissociation, of psychosis, of people having onsets of schizophrenia, or any issues like that come about due to people taking the medicine?
We haven't run into that, but we screen people carefully. There's definitely people that shouldn't take psychedelics. So when somebody is manic, it can make them more manic. So that's one contraindication. If people are not in touch with reality, if they're schizophrenic, if they're hearing voices, it's also not a good time to be taking psychedelics, as well as some drugs that are contraindicated. So we haven't had issues with ibogaine. I've seen some people that have trouble integrating 5-MeO when used on its own. And that's why it's so important to have a coach or a therapist that is well versed in the medicine that is checking in with you afterwards. Because sometimes it's as simple as getting grounded, like eating food, taking a warm shower, getting a massage. But when you're not aware of this and you're having these like reactivations, these flashbacks of the 5-MeO journey, people like they don't sleep, they don't eat, and then that by itself makes them spin out. So it's definitely something that's happening in the community. I've also seen it with ayahuasca, where people come back and they're just not the same for months afterwards.
What's next for you then, Punky, in terms of your personal journey of recovery, of moving forward? I mean, how much have you managed to undo with the therapeutic and medicinal solutions that you've looked at?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I probably took a year of really just diving in, and I just kept moving the needle, right? And I finally, I remember I hit one medicine journey where there was no more trauma. It was just done. It was just me finally meeting my young self, and I got to walk my young self back through, the happy stages of my life, vice the dark stages. And that was an interesting journey. And I just woke up, I was like, okay, we're done. We're moving forward now. But it's controlling the things that you can control, right? And focusing on those things that you can control. So can I control my sleep? Yeah. Can I control my thought patterns? Yes. Can I control what goes into my mind and what goes into my ears and what goes into my my mouth? Yeah, I can. So I'm focused on that and just being very mindful. Stuff comes up still, but now I'm ahead of it. Like I recognize it, and I'm able to sit with it now, vice reacting to it. And then I can just really kind of dive into it. So it's been an interesting journey on this side of the equation, vice where I was before. And now I have this huge community of guys and girls that are on this side. I like to say on this side of the medicine that I can talk to, that are my peers, my wife, my friends, my coach. I'm a coach now as well. And it's just been, my relationships are entirely different. They're much more intimate and more open and authentic with all my friends. So there's no more veil, like this is what you get. This is me. There's no hiding anything. So I don't feel I'm ever at risk to ever go down that path again. Will I, dive into the medicines more? If something comes up and I feel I need to, or I'm curious about it, yeah. But I don't lean on it. Another crutch for me. It's not something I chase. I'm not a psychonaut. For me, it was healing. It wasn't about expanded consciousness. So I got that part out of the way, and I'm just trying to live my best life right now while I can and just give back to others.
If there's some people that are in the special forces or perhaps are looking to come out pretty soon and are thinking that sounds an awful lot like the situation that I am in, the situation that you were in is now what they're feeling, what would you want to say to them?
Reach out. Yeah, that's the funny thing. Every client we have down there, and myself included, we're never self-referred. Someone else brought them, referred them, right? So someone else threw a life ring out for that person. So we're not self-arresting. We're not asking for help. And that's out of pride. It's out of fear. It's out of shame. It's out of all sorts of things. So really, it's just knowing that you have a community of brothers and sisters that will help you if you reach out. It's the same in any aspect of life. If you ask for help, somebody will help you. You just have to ask. And we've got a beautiful community that's been in this space for a long time. It was underground for a long time. Everyone's slowly coming to the surface now because we're not helping anybody by staying underground. We're just not doing it. And the momentum's already moving forward. So I think the narrative's changing, so it's safe to be in this space now, and maybe in some work environments it may not be, but it's getting more and more accepted. And it's safer than what we've been doing, which is taking these pharmacology, these medicines that we're taking, they were actually compounding the issues that we already had. But the big one's just ask for help, reach out, come to us, come to someone. We're not ever telling anybody to come to us. We're not the only retreat out there. We're one of the few that specializes in treating veterans, and we're run by veterans. but just ask for help.
What was your process of starting to become a facilitator or an assistant with the organization?
Yeah, Marchita reached out and he goes, "Hey, we got a big group coming down here. You want to help out? You want to?" I go, "Yeah, I'll drive the truck. I'll wash the dishes. I'll clean the towels and walk guys to the bathroom." And it started just like that, just holding space for guys. And then I think when you and I started this conversation, I said, "Yeah, I walked in the room and there's 6 guys. I know 4 of them." It was just more and more and more of that. I was like, "Damn, I know all these guys." And so that really kind of shifted, my mission to like, "Hey, these are my people," and wanting to go down. Initially, I think I probably jumped in too soon trying to help. I hadn't done a lot of my own work. And, you go from a non-feeling, non-caring guy to being completely busted wide open and being an empath and taking on everything. It's like, I need to back out of the space for a bit. And, but no, it was really healing because then I got to really learn, I think we kind of go through life thinking our trauma is so unique to us that no one's going to understand it. And then you hear all these guys and girls' story, and if there's 2 of them that are exactly the same, if not 3, and trauma is trauma, right? No matter when it happens or how it happened, it's still trauma. It's something that got you in, allowed you to get in your own way, and it stopped you from moving, your full potential. So I got into that, and then got serious about it. So I took a psychedelic integration coaching course, really dove into that, started coaching after the sessions. And now I go down, I'm a facilitator, I'm a coach. I manage the operations down there. And I just love the work.
Where can people go if they want to find out more about what it is that you guys do and the process of everything?
Yes, so our website is missionwithin.org. And then we're also funded by nonprofits, so the SEAL Future Fund, or SEALFutureFoundation.org, HeroicHeartsProject.org, and the Hope Project.org. They fund, we're probably 60, if not 70% donor funded for the clients that can come down, and then the rest are self-pay.
Is this available for anybody worldwide, or are you only taking people from the US?
No, we take everybody. We're pretty heavy on veterans, but nationality doesn't really matter.
Martin, anything to add before we finish up for today?
We're recruiting for a study that we have going on. So this is a Gold Star study. This is women that lost men in combat or to mental health issues. So information is on the website, and they would be coming to UT at Austin, getting their brain scanned, and then going to a retreat, coming back to the US, getting another brain scan. So we want to see what the effects of psilocybin are on prolonged grief, as well as 5-MeO, and these would be separate groups. So I just want to get the word out on that study because I think it's important to also help the widows of men who have served.
What's the website again for that?
Missionwithin.org.
Gentlemen, I very much appreciate the stuff that you're doing. I think that it's long overdue to try and give people that have served their country and put their bodies and their minds on the line to keep everybody else safe and free. The fact that you go through all of the sacrifices and then potentially come home to suffer more feels particularly unfair. So I really, really applaud the work that you're doing. It's incredibly inspiring, and long may it continue. What's happening, people? Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that episode, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.